On a freezing night in Brookline, a 7-year-old girl sat shivering on the stone steps, locked out in thin pajamas for a small mistake. No one stopped. No one looked twice. Until a man with everything pulled over and chose not to keep walking. If stories of healing, redemption, and second chances speak to your heart, please subscribe and stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. Snow fell in patient silence over the quiet streets just beyond Boston, softening the edges of brick townhouses and muffling the distant hum of the Green Line. Porch lights glowed like watchful eyes. Bare maple branches scraped the night with brittle fingers. On a narrow stoop along a Brookline side street, a small figure curled into herself, knees hugged tight, chin tucked into a threadbare teddy bear. Her name was Emma Collins. She was 7, and she was freezing. She had tried the knob twice, then a third time when courage rose and fell, but the door was latched against her. From behind the glass, warm lamplight flickered. Somewhere inside, a television murmured. Over that domestic hush, a sentence still rang in her ears, sharp, brittle, and meant to sting. If you can't control yourself, sleep with the snow. Maybe it will teach you. Vanessa Collins had not raised her voice. She didn't need to. The words did the work. The door closed with a soft click that sounded too much like finality. Emma pressed her cheek to the teddy's worn fur. "It's not my fault," she whispered, though the cold snatched her breath and turned the words to mist. Her fingers, raw and pink, worried at the loose thread near the bear's backseam, a nervous habit when fear got loud. The porch stone leached heat from her thin pajama pants. The air tasted like metal and winter. At the far end of the block, headlights slid across a rib of ice. A black sedan slowed, tires chattering softly against frozen slush, then drifted to the curb as if guided by something more than reflex. Inside sat Alexander Grant, 42, tie loosened, the day's negotiations still buzzing in his skull. He had left a late meeting by the river, the kind where charts glowed and numbers argued and people nodded at the right time. None of that mattered now, not next to the sight of a child alone in January's bite. He cut the engine. The sudden quiet made the winter louder. For a heartbeat, he stayed in his seat, palms on the wheel, measuring possibilities the way he measured risk at a boardroom table. Then the decision made itself. He opened the door and stepped into the cold. The snow stung like a clean slap. He crossed the street with careful steps, shoes crisp against crusted ice, and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "Hey," he said. And even to his own ears his voice sounded different, lower, soft, almost careful. "What are you doing out here?" Emma didn't look up at first. She had learned that looking up often made things worse, but his voice held none of the sharp edges she knew. Slowly she raised her eyes. They were gray-blue, the color of first light over the river, and rimmed with red. "I can't go inside," she said, the words so thin they almost snapped. He saw the pajama cuffs, damp and stiff. He saw the small tremor fluttering at her jaw. He saw the teddy bear, the kind a child hauls from one life to another and calls home. Understanding came like a cold fist. Anger followed, clean, focused, not at her, never at her. Gently he shrugged out of his wool coat. It was heavy and warm and too expensive for its purpose, which was now to be a shelter. He wrapped it around her shoulders, careful to cover her hands. The coat swallowed her, and still he wished it were bigger. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, barely more than breath. "Not like this." She studied him as if testing the strength of a bridge before stepping onto it. "Are you going to leave too?" The question robbed the air. Alexander felt it land in a place he usually didn't let anyone see. He remembered doors closing in his own childhood, remembered promises filed under later and then forgotten. He, who had built a life on the certainty of data and devices and plans, found himself standing at the edge of something that didn't answer to any of those things. "No," he said. The word surprised him in its certainty. "I won't leave you." The porch light cast a small halo across the snow-dusted steps. From inside the house, laughter, Vanessa's, casual, brittle, the sound of someone who believed consequences waited for other people. Alexander glanced at the door and then away, as if refusing to grant it power. He reached out his hand. "Come on, let's get you warm." Emma looked at the door one last time, the way a person might look at the ocean before turning inland after a near drowning. She slid her hand into his. It was bird-light and cold as a coin. He lifted her gently, and she let the bear wedge between them, an odd little pact sealed by stuffing and thread. She was too light, and that fact lodged under his ribs like a pebble you can't shake from your shoe. He carried her down the steps and across the street. The car breathed heat. He buckled her in with clumsy haste, adjusting the coat so it wrapped her like a cocoon. "Do you know your name?" he asked, because questions made things steadier. "Emma," she said. "Emma Collins." "I'm Alexander," he said. He hesitated, then added, "You can call me Alex if you like." She considered this, then nodded, as if granting him temporary citizenship in her small and fiercely guarded country. He started the car. The heater pushed out a gritty warmth that still felt like a miracle. Snow feathered the windshield. The wipers kept a slow rhythm. He checked the rearview mirror and saw her eyes half closed, lashes rhymed with the last of the cold. He put the car in gear. Boston Children's Hospital wasn't far, not in miles, but the road between the stoop and the red neon sign felt like the span between before and after. He drove the way you drive when someone's future rides in the back seat, steady, fast enough, no risks. Streetlights slid by like measured breaths. "Is there someone you want me to call?" he asked, testing ground gently. She shook her head and burrowed deeper into the coat. "Please don't call her," she whispered. "Okay." He didn't ask which her. Some answers arrive already underlined. He told himself to think like a CEO, triage the urgent, delegate the rest. But this wasn't a product delay or a line on a balance sheet. It was a child, and he was the adult in the car, which meant there was no one to delegate to. An odd calm settled over him. It felt like purpose. They turned off Beacon and threaded toward Longwood. The storm made the city intimate, buildings drawing close, strangers reduced to silhouettes. Emma's breathing evened into small, soft pulls of air. The teddy bear's ragged ear peeked out from the coat. Alexander found himself wanting to know the bear's name and then laughed a little at the thought, quietly, so as not to wake her. He stopped at a light. A couple hurried across the intersection, scarves up to their noses, hand in hand. Beyond them, in the soft blur of snow, the red letters came into view. Boston Children's Hospital. The sign's glow haloed the falling flakes. The sliding doors waited with their mechanical mercy, and he felt the old, familiar scent of antiseptic and possibility in his memory. He glanced back. Emma's eyes had opened again, not wide, but enough to show she was still with him, still watching to see what people did when they promised things. "We're almost there," he said. "They'll help you get warm. I'll be with you." Her mouth shaped a tiny okay. She tightened her grip on the bear, as if squeezing courage from cotton. The light changed. He eased forward, tires humming over wet pavement. He passed the main entrance once, looped back, and pulled up under the overhang where the awning trapped a pocket of air less cruel than the street. For a moment, he let the engine idle and watched the doors. A current of families moved through, worry in winter coats, hope in hospital bracelets. He turned off the car. The world went quiet again. The kind of quiet that happens just before you step from what you were into what you might become. Alexander looked back one more time. Emma. She met his eyes. I meant it, he said. I won't leave you. He opened his door, and the wind reached in like a reminder. He rounded the car, lifted her, coat, teddy, all, and held her close. She was warmer now, but still small, still breakable. And he understood, with a clarity that erased all the day's other concerns, that this night would divide his life into the part before he stopped and the part after. They moved toward the bright doors together. When the sensors caught them, the glass parted with a soft hiss. Warm air spilled out. He took one step forward, and in that instant, before the hospital took over and machines spoke in careful numbers, before forms and questions and urgent hands, he felt Emma's breath against his collar and heard the smallest exhale, almost a word, almost a trust. He stepped inside. The automatic doors at Boston Children's Hospital parted with a hiss, releasing a wash of warmth and sterile air. Inside, fluorescent lights gleamed against white tile, corridors branching like arteries toward triage rooms and trauma bays. Alexander Grant carried Emma through those doors, his coat still wrapped around her. Her head lay against his shoulder, lips pale, breath shallow. She stirred once, a faint murmur, then slipped back into heavy stillness. A nurse at the triage desk looked up, startled by the sight of a suited man with a limp child in his arms. Training took over. She sprang from her chair, calling out, "We need a gurney! Pediatric, code Frost!" Two orderlies rushed forward with a wheeled stretcher. Alexander laid Emma down with a care he had never used on anything else in his life, his hand lingering on her shoulder until the nurse gently moved him aside. "Vitals!" barked a resident in scrubs. "Temperature, 34.5 Celsius. Pulse, weak and thready. Oxygen saturation, 89%. Warm IV fluids, forced air warming blanket. Let's go!" The team pushed the stretcher down the hall, machines clattering alongside. Alexander followed, chest tight, every beep of the monitor like a hammer. He had seen hospital wards before, but always from the vantage point of business, presentations, and sterile tours. Never like this. Never with a child's life tethered to numbers that dipped too low. Dr. Melissa Harper, attending physician for pediatric emergency, strode into the bay. She was tall, decisive, her voice calm even in urgency. "What have we got?" 7-year-old female, hypothermia, 34.5. Possible ingestion. Patient presence with mild CNS depression. Guardian? All eyes shifted to Alexander. "I found her locked outside," he said quickly. "She told me she couldn't get back in. She was shivering, barely responsive, and she might have been drugged. She mentioned pills." Dr. Harper's eyes flicked toward Emma, then back to him. "We'll run toxicology. Thank you for bringing her." Emma's small body was swaddled in warming blankets, IV tubing taped carefully to her hand. She whimpered faintly as the line flushed. A nurse soothed her with a soft hum. Alexander stood at the edge, fists tight, forcing himself not to pace. He had managed billion-dollar crises, held boardrooms in silence with a glance. Yet here he was, helpless, every second stretching too long. Minutes later, a nurse read aloud, "Blood sugar, 75, normal. Electrolytes pending. Toxicology, positive for benzodiazepines, low concentration." Dr. Harper's jaw set. Sedatives. Too much to be accidental. She looked at the team. "Document and notify CPS, mandatory reporting." The words sank into Alexander like ice. Child Protective Services. The state was about to be involved. He knew enough law to realize what that meant. Hearings, forms, battles. And yet, the alternative, sending Emma back, was unthinkable. Before he could steady himself, the doors burst open. Heels clacked on tile. Perfume cut through antiseptic. Vanessa Collins swept in, her face carefully arranged into panic and outrage. "There she is," she cried. "Emma, oh my sweet girl." Alexander stepped in front of the bed instinctively, blocking her path. "Stay back." Vanessa's painted lips curved into something sharp. "And who are you to tell me that? This is my stepdaughter. She has an overactive imagination, and you— What? Some stranger who dragged her here?" Dr. Harper intervened, her tone clipped. "Ms. Collins, I'm Dr. Harper. Your stepdaughter was admitted with severe hypothermia and tested positive for sedatives. This is not imagination." Vanessa's mask cracked just slightly. "Sedatives? That's absurd. She must have gotten into my prescription cabinet." Emma stirred faintly on the bed. Her lips parted, voice thin as paper. "No, she made me take them." The room froze. Even the monitors seemed to pause. Emma's small fingers reached out blindly, and Alexander caught them, steady, warm. "Don't let her take me home," she whispered. That single sentence undid every lie. Alexander felt the squeeze of her hand like a contract written in blood. Dr. Harper's eyes hardened. She turned to Vanessa. "Until CPS completes an investigation, Emma will remain under protective custody in this hospital. You are not permitted to discharge her." Vanessa's composure shattered. "This is outrageous! She's confused! She's just a child!" "And yet, her body tells the story," Dr. Harper shot back. "Sedatives don't appear out of thin air. Hypothermia doesn't happen inside a safe home." Vanessa's lawyerly instinct faltered in the face of hard data. She spun on Alexander instead, eyes blazing. "You think money gives you power here? You're nothing to her." Alexander's reply was low, quiet, the steel in his voice undeniable. "Tell that to the child who just begged me not to leave her." Vanessa faltered. For the first time, Alexander saw fear flash in her eyes, not for Emma, but for herself. Security escorted her from the ward as she hissed threats under her breath. When the doors shut, Alexander turned back to Emma. She was dozing again, safer under layers of warmth, the monitors steadier now. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his hand trembling. Dr. Harper stood beside him. "She'll stabilize, but this is only the beginning. CPS will need testimony, medical records, everything. Are you prepared for that?" Alexander didn't hesitate. "Yes." He glanced down at Emma's small hand curled around his finger. "Whatever it takes." Outside, snow still fell, blanketing Boston in white silence. Inside, a battle had begun, not in boardrooms or banks, but here, in the fragile space where a child's voice had finally been heard. The CPS regional office on Congress Street didn't look like the place where a child's fate could turn. Beige walls, buzzing fluorescents, paper stacked like barricades. The air smelled faintly of reheated coffee and overused carpet cleaner. Tina Morales, 35, hunched over her desk. She had worked child protection long enough to know the sound files made when they slipped through cracks. Too quiet, too final. The hospital had sent over an emergency intake just after dawn. Emma Grace Collins, age 7, suspected neglect, hypothermia, positive toxicology for sedatives. Reporter, Dr. Melissa Harper, pediatric emergency. Tina entered the name into the case system. The screen blinked. A file appeared. Her stomach sank. Case number 21774. Reporter, Sarah Collins, maternal aunt. Year, 2 years ago. Allegations, neglect, verbal abuse, unexplained bruising. Status, closed. There it was. A door shut too quickly, evidence dismissed after one home visit. No follow-up, no second look. She leaned back, eyes burning. She remembered the training manuals, the endless meetings about threshold of evidence. But she also remembered the faces, the children who came back 2 years later in body bags, or worse, eyes that no longer believed in adults. The door to the office swung open. Alexander Grant entered, his presence like a current snapping through the room. He wore the same suit from the night before, though his tie was gone, fatigue carved into the lines of his face. He carried himself like a man who had decided long ago that silence was surrender. "I'm here for Emma Collins," he said, his voice controlled but sharp enough to cut. Tina stood. "I'm the assigned worker. I have the intake from the hospital." "Then you know she had sedatives in her blood." "Yes." "And you know she nearly froze to death because her stepmother locked her outside." "Yes." "Then explain this." He dropped a printed page on her desk. He had already pulled it. Someone inside must have slipped it to him. It was the old case summary, stamped with the fatal word, "closed." Tina's jaw tightened. "That was before my assignment. I can't speak to the investigator's judgment at the time." Alexander leaned forward, eyes hard. "Judgment? A child begged me not to send her home. She was dosed with drugs. And you're telling me 2 years ago this was brushed off as nothing? Do you understand what that means? Your system almost buried her alive." Other staff in the office looked up, then quickly back down at their screens. Everyone had heard conversations like this. Few had the courage to keep pressing. Tina forced herself to meet his gaze. "Mr. Grant, CPS doesn't run on anger. We need evidence that meets statutory standards." "You have it," Alexander snapped. "Hospital records, lab results, a terrified child whispering the truth. Statements alone aren't always admissible," he cut her off. "Then I'll get you more. Financial records, witnesses, whatever it takes. But don't tell me this is just another file on your desk. Because to Emma, this isn't a case. It's survival." The words hit harder than any shouting. Tina looked down at the screen again, at the sterile lines of text. She remembered the photo in the hospital report. Emma pale against warmed blankets, clutching a teddy bear like it was the only adult she trusted. Her chest tightened. We failed her once. She closed the old file with a click and pulled up the intake form. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could check the box for standard investigation. It would buy time, appease protocol, bury urgency under paper, or she could do something riskier. She chose. She typed, "Emergency review, prior history reopened, risk level critical." The system pinged. The file that had once been sealed with closed now bore a new header, active investigation. Alexander exhaled, the sound low but fierce. He had fought countless battles in boardrooms, but none had mattered like this. He looked at Tina. "Thank you. Don't let her slip away again." Before Tina could respond, the door to the office banged open. Vanessa Collins strode in, heels clicking like gunfire on tile. Her lawyer wasn't with her this time. She didn't need him for theatrics. "You have my stepdaughter," she declared, her voice pitched high enough to carry. "And you're letting this man, this stranger, interfere in my family's life." Tina's professional mask slid into place. "Ms. Collins, Emma is under hospital custody until the court rules otherwise. You cannot remove her." Vanessa's smile was ice. "We'll see how long that lasts. I've handled bureaucrats before." She turned her gaze on Alexander. "Do you think money buys you parenthood? You're nothing but a lonely man trying to play hero." Alexander's reply was measured, his voice low enough that only she and Tina could hear. Tell yourself whatever helps you sleep. But Emma told the truth last night, and the truth has more power than you do. Vanessa's eyes flared, but she turned sharply, heels striking the floor as she stormed out on it. The office hummed again, whispers buzzing between caseworkers. Tina watched her go, then looked back at Alexander. For the first time in years, she felt the old spark that had driven her into this work, the belief that protecting one child could change the world. "You'll have a hearing soon," she said. "Suffolk County Family Court. Be ready. Bring everything you have." Alexander nodded once. "I will." As he left the office, snow swirled outside the tall windows, blanketing Boston in gray-white. But Tina felt something shift in the air. For once, the file wasn't just numbers and codes. For once, the system was about to fight. The pediatric ward was quieter than the ER, quieter in the way libraries are, carrying whispers and footsteps like secrets. Machines hummed at each bedside, monitors rising and falling in green waves. Outside the window, Boston's skyline glowed faint under the haze of snowfall. Emma lay curled in the hospital bed, her small form almost hidden under the mound of blankets. The teddy bear sat tucked against her chest. Its seams were worn, one eye button loose. The kind of toy you don't throw away because it has outlived being just cotton. It had become memory, confidant, shield. Alexander sat beside her, shoulders slumped in the visitor chair. He had been awake all night, unwilling to leave, as if stepping away even for a cup of coffee might undo the fragile thread that tied Emma to safety. He watched the rise and fall of her breathing. Each time the monitor beeped steady, he felt his lungs loosen. When Emma stirred, blinking slowly, he leaned forward. "Hey, kiddo. You're safe. Do you need anything?" She shook her head and reached for the bear. Her small hands fumbled at its back seam until she tugged out something hidden, a crumpled little notebook, bound by tape, pages smudged with crayon. She pressed it into his hand. "It's all in here," she whispered. Alexander looked down. He opened the cover carefully, afraid the fragile tape might tear. Inside were drawings, simple, childlike, but sharp in their truth. One page showed a little girl standing outside under crooked snowflakes, a big door locked behind her. Another page showed a pill bottle, scrawled in blue crayon with round shapes spilling out. Beside it, a shaky caption, "The green and blue pills she makes me take." His throat tightened. He turned another page. The same girl curled in bed, lines around her eyes meant to be tears, with the words, "Don't tell or she'll get mad." It was testimony, the kind adults dismiss until it's too late. But here it was. Truth in crayon, stronger than polished lies. "Emma," his voice cracked. "Why did you hide this?" Her fingers clutched the teddy tighter. "Because no one believed me before. I thought maybe, if I saved it, someone would." Before he could answer, the door opened. Vanessa stepped in, her hair perfect, her coat too fine for the sterile room. She carried a brittle smile as if she'd practiced it in the mirror. "There you are, sweetheart," she said, as though nothing had happened. "Doctors say you'll be fine. Time to come home." Alexander rose immediately. "She's not leaving." Vanessa tilted her head, her smile tightening. "You really think you can keep her here? She's my husband's child, not yours. You have no standing." Dr. Harper appeared from behind, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Collins, the child is here under medical custody. Discharge is not an option until clearance." Vanessa's mask faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Emma is fragile. She gets confused, makes things up. Locking doors, pills, nonsense. She has a wild imagination." Emma's hand shot out, clutching Alexander's sleeve. Tears welled fast, spilling before she could blink them away. Please don't let her take me. The sound pierced through the sterile quiet. Alexander knelt so he was level with Emma. He showed her the notebook, open to the drawing of the locked door. You did the right thing keeping this safe. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Dr. Harper's eyes flicked to the pages. Her jaw tightened. She addressed Vanessa sharply. We have medical evidence of sedatives, corroborated by this child's statements and documentation she's kept herself. If you attempt removal, I will call security, and I will file for immediate protective custody. Vanessa's calm cracked. You're letting a child's scribbles dictate law? This is absurd. Alexander stood, voice quiet but edged with steel. These aren't scribbles. They're survival. She told the truth in the only language she had. For a moment, silence ruled. Then Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression flickering with irritation, and swept out without another word. When the door closed, Emma broke. She clutched Alexander's arm, tears staining his sleeve. Don't let them send me back. He wrapped his arms around her gently, careful of the IV line. I won't. Not ever. The teddy bear was crushed between them, its worn button eye staring past, witness to the vow. Dr. Harper placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. CPS will want that notebook. It could be the piece that tips the balance. Alexander nodded. He looked down at Emma. They'll hear your voice this time. I'll make sure of it. Emma sniffled, curling against him. Her grip finally eased, exhaustion dragging her back into sleep. For the first time since that cold porch, Alexander let himself breathe deeper. The teddy bear, the notebook, the drawings. This was no longer just a battle of words. It was proof. And in the sterile light of the hospital, truth had finally crawled from hiding. Boston's financial district hummed with the rhythm of money, briefcases clicking, revolving doors spinning, elevators carrying men and women who measured their worth in contracts and numbers. For Alexander Grant, the setting was familiar, yet today felt different. He wasn't here to negotiate a merger. He was here to hunt for truth. He sat in a quiet conference room overlooking State Street, across from Mark Ramsey, a man in his late 50s with a square jaw and the kind of calm that came from decades of digging through financial crime. A former federal investigator turned private consultant, Ramsey was known for pulling threads until an entire web collapsed. Alexander pushed a folder across the table. Emma Collins, 7 years old. Her mother died in 2021. Before she passed, she set up a trust fund, $250,000. Emma is the sole beneficiary, but I believe Vanessa Collins has been trying to drain it. Ramsey opened the folder, flipping through bank statements, legal documents, court filings. His sharp eyes paused at a particular page. Authorization form for guardian access, signed last year. He tapped the signature at the bottom. This judge's stamp, see how the ink bleeds unevenly? And the initials are misaligned. I've seen cleaner forgeries from first-year fraudsters. Alexander leaned forward, his pulse quickening. You're saying it's fake? Forged, Ramsey confirmed. No judge in Suffolk County signs this way, and the notary listed here? Retired 5 years ago. The investigator's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, calling up databases that most people didn't know existed. Screens filled with records, timestamps, withdrawal attempts. Ramsey frowned. She's already tried to move the money. Multiple requests flagged, last one just this week. Bank compliance stalled her because of irregular paperwork, but if she finds another channel, she'll succeed. Alexander's chest burned with anger. She locked Emma in the snow for wetting the bed. She drugged her to keep her quiet. And now she's stealing the money meant to secure her future. Ramsey closed the folder, eyes sharp. With this evidence, we can build a fraud case. Surveillance cameras at the branch will confirm it. You'll have more than testimony. You'll have her caught on tape. Hours later, in Ramsey's office, the footage arrived. Vanessa Collins, elegant coat draped over her shoulders, striding into a downtown bank. She handed papers across the counter, her smile thin and practiced. The teller shook their head. Vanessa's face twisted, her palm slamming down on the counter. She grabbed the papers back, turned sharply, and stalked out. Alexander watched the grainy footage, fury building. She's desperate. Ramsey nodded. And dangerous. People who forge court orders don't stop easily. If she knows she's losing Emma, she'll escalate. Alexander straightened. His mind was already moving to the next step. Then we get ahead of her. File an injunction, freeze the account, and put the evidence in the hands of CPS and the court. As he left the office, the late afternoon wind whipped cold against his face. But his resolve was hotter than fire. Vanessa's cruelty was no longer hidden in shadows. It had paper trails, forged stamps, cameras that didn't lie. Back at Boston Children's, Emma sat up in bed, coloring quietly with a box of crayons Ms. Carter, her art teacher, had dropped off. Alexander entered, still holding the folder of evidence. He didn't show her the papers. She didn't need the weight of financial jargon. But he crouched beside her and touched the corner of her page. "What are you drawing?" Emma looked up shyly. "A key. A rainbow key. It opens a house where nobody yells." Alexander's chest tightened. He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "That's beautiful, Emma. And you should know, people like Vanessa, they can't lock you out anymore. I won't let them." Emma studied him, her gray-blue eyes searching his face for cracks. Then softly she asked, "How do you know?" He glanced at the teddy bear on her lap, remembering the notebook hidden inside. "Because we found the truth. And the truth is stronger than her lies." She nodded as if weighing the words. Then, for the first time, her small hand reached out unprompted, resting against his. "Then maybe I can sleep tonight." Alexander stayed with her until she drifted off, her fingers still curled around his. Outside, the snow fell again over Boston, soft but relentless. He stood by the window, folder clutched in his hand, and whispered to himself, "This ends in court." And for the first time, he believed he could win. The granite steps of Suffolk County Family Court were slick with snow, the morning air sharp with the bite of January. Alexander Grant climbed them two at a time, his navy coat pulled close against the wind. Behind him, attorney Michael Reeves carried a leather briefcase heavy with affidavits, financial reports, and the damning surveillance stills of Vanessa at the bank counter. Inside, courtroom 3A buzzed with subdued tension. Family courts often held stories too painful to speak aloud, but today's hearing already had whispers circulating in the hall. A wealthy biotech CEO fighting for custody of a 7-year-old girl against her stepmother, accused of abuse and fraud. It was a case that drew attention even here. At the petitioner's table, Alexander sat straight-backed, his hands folded, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. He wasn't thinking about shareholders, quarterly reports, or medical patents. He was thinking about Emma, about the way she had drawn a rainbow key the night before, her tiny fingers tracing hope onto paper. Across the aisle sat Vanessa Collins. Her dark hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her tailored suit immaculate, her lips painted crimson. But there was a tension in the way she adjusted her papers, as if she knew her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. Beside her, Richard Dawson, a seasoned family lawyer, leaned in with a reassuring whisper. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Eleanor Whitfield entered. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, she had presided over countless custody battles. She carried the air of a woman who had little patience for theatrics. The judge took her seat. This is an emergency custody petition concerning the minor Emma Grace Collins. Mr. Reeves, you may proceed. Michael Reeves rose. His voice was calm, but each word carried weight. Your Honor, the evidence before you shows a child endangered in the most serious ways. Emma Collins was locked outside her home in sub-freezing temperatures, resulting in hypothermia. Toxicology reports from Boston Children's Hospital confirm sedatives in her system without medical cause. And our investigator has uncovered a fraudulent attempt by Ms. Vanessa Collins to access Emma's $250,000 trust fund through forged guardianship documents. He set a stack of papers on the bench. We request emergency custody be granted to Mr. Alexander Grant, who has provided for Emma's medical care and safety since the incident. Judge Whitfield's gaze shifted to Dawson. Mr. Dawson? The defense attorney rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is a gross mischaracterization. Emma is a child prone to exaggeration, guided by strangers with motives of their own. My client, Ms. Collins, has been her guardian in practice since her father's death. The so-called sedatives, likely accidental ingestion. The trust fund? Administrative confusion, nothing more. Vanessa stood, placing a hand over her heart, her tone saccharine. Emma has a vivid imagination, Judge. She's been through so much. I love her. She belongs with family, not with a man who met her on a doorstep. Alexander rose before the judge could respond. His voice, deep and steady, filled the room. With respect, Your Honor, I didn't just meet her. I found her in pajamas, freezing on the steps, locked out by this woman. She wasn't imagining. She was shaking so violently I thought she might not make it to the hospital. She asked me one question. If I would leave her too. I will not. The courtroom stilled. Judge Whitfield studied him for a long moment, then turned to Reeves. What of the financial evidence? Reeves nodded to the clerk, who dimmed the lights. A screen flickered on, showing the bank surveillance footage, Vanessa at the counter, her frustration visible as the teller refused her request. The forged documents appeared next on the projector, signatures mismatched, notary long retired. This is not administrative error, Reeves said. This is deliberate fraud. A murmur spread across the courtroom benches. Vanessa's mask faltered. Dawson interjected quickly. Objection, Your Honor. This footage proves nothing about intent. My client merely attempted to manage funds in good faith. Enough! Judge Whitfield snapped, her gavel striking once. The sound rang like a gunshot. The evidence is clear. Sedatives in a child's bloodstream, hypothermia from neglect, forged documents attempting to drain her inheritance. This court will not gamble with the welfare of a child. She turned her gaze to Vanessa, whose composure had hardened into thinly veiled rage. Ms. Collins, until a full investigation is completed, custody of Emma Grace Collins is removed from your care, effective immediately. Temporary guardianship is granted to Mr. Alexander Grant under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 119, Section 24. The gavel fell again. So ordered. The room erupted, reporters scribbling notes, whispers echoing. Vanessa shot to her feet, her voice shrill. This is a farce! He's nothing to her! This court is stealing my daughter! Judge Whitfield fixed her with a glare. Sit down, Ms. Collins, or you will be removed. And let me be clear. Guardianship is not ownership. You do not own this child. Vanessa's mouth snapped shut, her face flushing with fury. She dropped heavily back into her chair. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief surged through him, tempered by the knowledge that this was only temporary. But it was enough. Tonight, Emma would not go back to Vanessa. Tonight, she would sleep without fear. As the hearing adjourned, Alexander stepped into the hallway, reporters already clamoring for comment. He ignored them, pulling out his phone instead. When Dr. Harper answered, he spoke softly but firmly. "Tell Emma," he said, "that the court says she's safe with me now." And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself a small, unguarded smile. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the penthouse that crowned Clarendon Tower in Back Bay. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched the city of Boston, the Charles River glinting under a quilt of snow, the skyline lit like a constellation. For Alexander Grant, this was where he came home to silence. For Emma Collins, 7 years old, it was overwhelming, a world of gleaming marble floors, shelves taller than she could imagine, and a kitchen island wider than her old bedroom. She lingered in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear so tightly that one ear bent flat. "It's too big," she whispered. Alexander crouched to meet her eyes. "It won't feel so big when it's filled," he said gently. "We'll make it feel like home." He carried her overnight bag into the guest room he had prepared. Soft gray sheets, a night lamp shaped like a crescent moon, pajamas folded neatly on the dresser. Yet when the lights dimmed and the city outside went quiet, the size of the apartment seemed to press down on her. Sometime after midnight, Alexander stirred awake to the faintest sound, a shuffle, a muffled sob. He opened his door to find Emma curled in the hallway, blanket around her shoulders, teddy bear under her chin. "Emma," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "Why aren't you in bed?" Her eyes blinked open, glazed with fear. "I dreamed she came back," she murmured. "And she said, you'd leave me too." Alexander's chest tightened. He sat down right there on the hardwood floor and pulled another blanket over both of them. "Dreams can lie," he said softly, "but I won't. I'll be here when you wake up. Every time." For a long while, neither moved. Eventually, Emma's small head rested against his shoulder, her breathing slowing until it steadied. Alexander leaned back against the wall, the city lights spilling across the floor, and kept his silent watch until dawn broke pale across the river. By morning, he felt like a man who had been in a fistfight with sleep. But he was determined to do something ordinary, something that might feel like love. The kitchen, however, had never been his battleground. He opened cupboards with a frown, found flour, eggs, and milk, and decided pancakes couldn't be that hard. The first attempt glued itself to the pan like cement. The second folded into itself in surrender. The third sent a curl of smoke drifting toward the ceiling. Emma padded in, hair tousled, pajamas still wrinkled from sleep. She froze at the sight of the tall CEO in a pressed shirt, wielding a spatula like a weapon. "Are those pancakes?" she asked cautiously. Alexander glanced at the blackened edge on the skillet, then laughed under his breath. "They're supposed to be. Right now, they're more like pancake experiments." She giggled, a sound so light it startled him. "They look funny." He slid the least burned one onto a plate and set it in front of her. "Breakfast a la disaster," he announced with mock formality. Emma climbed onto the stool, teddy bear in her lap. She cut into the lopsided pancake and took a bite. After a thoughtful chew, she smiled. "It tastes happy." Alexander blinked. "Happy?" She nodded earnestly. "Because no one ever made me breakfast before." The words pierced him deeper than any boardroom critique ever had. He sat across from her, watching her small hands lift another bite, and realized he had never felt the weight of responsibility and the gift of it so strongly. The rest of the day unfolded more quietly. Emma explored the penthouse, trailing her fingers across rows of books, peeking into the office where prototypes of medical devices sat under glass, gazing wide-eyed at the skyline. She returned often to the living room, sitting near Alexander as if proximity anchored her. That evening, when he closed his laptop and set aside work that once ruled his life, she shifted closer on the couch. For a long while, neither spoke. She leaned her head against his arm, teddy bear squashed between them, as if testing how much closeness he would allow. Finally, her voice came so soft he almost missed it. "Can I call you Dad? Maybe one day?" Alexander turned slowly, his throat tightening. He placed his hand gently over hers. "Emma," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You can call me whatever makes you feel safe. If someday that's Dad, I'll be the proudest man alive." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but her smile was certain. She pressed her head against him again, whispering, "Someday." For a man who had built towers of glass and steel, it was the most important promise he had ever received. And as the snow continued to fall outside, the penthouse no longer felt like an echo chamber of wealth. It felt, for the first time, like the beginning of a home. Boston Public Elementary buzzed with the restless energy of winter mornings, boots squeaking across polished linoleum, laughter tumbling from classrooms, the smell of crayons and pencil shavings lingering in the air. Emma Collins, clutching her worn teddy bear inside her backpack like a secret charm, walked at Alexander's side down the long hallway. He had enrolled her quietly, insisting she needed routine, classmates, a space where her days weren't defined by court hearings or hospital corridors. For a girl who had known only survival, the idea of school felt like stepping into another life. Her classroom was bright with paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling. Ms. Carter, the art teacher, greeted her warmly. "Emma, right? We're painting today. Whatever home means to us, you can sit wherever you'd like." Emma slid into a seat near the window. Around her, children dipped brushes into bright paints, neat little houses with chimneys, apartments with glowing windows, stick figures holding hands under the sun. Emma stared at the blank paper, frozen. Home. What did that word mean to her? Her fingers hovered over the brush until at last she dipped it into blue. Slowly, carefully, she began. First came a small figure, a girl with brown hair holding a teddy bear. Above her, she painted a rainbow arcing across the sky. Beneath it, she painted a house, not like the one in Brookline with locked doors, but one with wide yellow windows and a front door open to light. Beside the girl, she painted a tall man in a navy suit, crouching low so his hand touched her shoulder. The brushstrokes were uneven, but the feeling was unmistakable. A longing, fragile yet fierce, spilled across the page. When she was done, Ms. Carter paused behind her, hand to her heart. "Emma, this is extraordinary." Emma flushed. "It's just colors." "No," Ms. Carter said gently. "It's your truth." That afternoon, with Emma's shy permission, Ms. Carter snapped a photo of the painting and posted it on the school's parent newsletter with a simple caption. "One of my students painted this today when asked what home means. Sometimes art says what words cannot." By evening, the image had traveled further than anyone expected. Parents shared it with friends, then neighbors, then strangers. Soon, Boston community groups online buzzed with comments. "Who is this child? This breaks me. The detail. She's gifted. That man in the picture, he's protecting her. Whoever he is, thank you." In the penthouse that night, Alexander scrolled through the storm of posts, his jaw tightening. Among the voices of support, he also saw venom. Vanessa had seized the moment, posting staged photos and a narrative that Emma was kidnapped by a stranger with money. Alexander shut the laptop, unwilling to let Emma see the ugliness. But Emma noticed the tension in his face. She set down her colored pencils and asked softly, "Did people see it? The Rainbow House?" He hesitated, then nodded. They did, and a lot of them understood. Emma blinked in surprise. Even strangers? Especially strangers, he said. Sometimes people we don't know are the first to see us clearly. At school the next morning, Emma walked into the art room and gasped. Her painting hung enlarged on the classroom door, framed by Ms. Carter. Children clustered around, pointing and whispering. Ms. Carter smiled. "This is Emma's. It's about finding a safe place." Emma shrank against Alexander's side, but when she saw the other children smiling, not mocking, but admiring, something shifted in her. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. Local reporters picked up the story. Articles appeared. 7-year-old's painting of home under a rainbow touches Boston's heart. Support poured in. Letters, art supplies, donations for the school's program. But more than publicity, what mattered was Emma's face. She came home that week humming, her backpack filled with sketches, her hands stained with paint. She painted the city skyline, the Charles River, a teddy bear sitting beneath a rainbow. Each brushstroke seemed to stitch something in her back together. One evening, Alexander found her asleep at the dining table, head resting on her folded arms, her latest painting spread beneath her. He lifted it gently. Emma and Alexander standing side by side, their outlines framed by the rainbow house again, but this time the windows glowed brighter, the sky was full of stars. He stood there a long moment, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. Then he tucked it carefully into a folder as if it were evidence, not for court, but for life. Proof that healing was possible, that a child once locked out in the cold could paint her way toward belonging. Outside, the city glittered against the snow, and for the first time Alexander thought, maybe Emma's art wasn't just her salvation. Maybe it was his, too. Forest Hills Cemetery lay hushed beneath a blanket of melting snow. The tall oaks stood like silent guardians, their bare branches weaving shadows across the stone paths. For Alexander and Emma, the silence was both heavy and sacred. Emma walked slowly, her red coat bright against the muted winter ground, clutching her teddy bear in one hand and a folded drawing in the other. She didn't ask where they were going, she already knew. When they stopped in front of a modest gray headstone, her small body trembled. Clara Collins, beloved mother, 1988, 2021. The words carved in granite seemed too simple for the loss they carried. Emma knelt, placing a bouquet of daisies at the base. Then she unfolded the drawing, a child and a mother holding hands under a sky filled with stars and a rainbow stretching wide above them. She smoothed the paper against the stone. "Hi, Mommy," she whispered, her breath clouding in the cold air. "It's me. I just wanted you to know. I'm safe now." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "There's someone who listens. He makes pancakes, even if they're burned. He stays when I have bad dreams. He promised he won't leave." Her forehead rested against the stone. "I miss you, but I think you can rest now. I'm not invisible anymore." Alexander stood a few steps back, throat tight, his chest heavy with unspoken vows. He had not known Clara, but he made a promise to her in silence. "Your daughter will never be left alone again." Emma slipped her small hand into his, and when she looked up, her eyes carried both sorrow and strength. "We can go now," she said softly. 2 weeks later, the case that had shaken Boston filled courtroom 5B. The benches were crowded. Journalists, advocates, neighbors. The air was thick with anticipation. At the prosecutor's table, exhibits were neatly stacked. Medical reports showing sedatives in Emma's blood, financial records proving forged signatures, surveillance stills of Vanessa at the bank. Witness lists included Dr. Melissa Harper, neighbors who had heard Emma's cries, and even Ms. Carter, her art teacher, who had testified to Emma's painting as a child's cry for safety. Vanessa Collins sat at the defense table, sharp in a navy suit, her hair perfectly arranged. But the tension around her eyes betrayed her. Her lawyer, Richard Dawson, whispered rapidly, but she barely nodded, her nails tapping the table. Judge Eleanor Whitfield entered, her presence commanding silence. "We are here to conclude the matter of Commonwealth versus Vanessa Collins." The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the evidence demonstrates a clear pattern of abuse and exploitation. This is not a single lapse, but repeated acts. Locking a child outside in sub-freezing temperatures, administering sedatives to suppress her voice, attempting to steal her inheritance through forged court documents. Emma Collins is not an imagination-prone child. She is a survivor whose story has been corroborated by medicine, finance, and eyewitness testimony." He pointed to the exhibits. "This court has the responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Today, justice demands that protection." Dawson stood, his tone strained. "Your Honor, my client has been vilified by public opinion. She loved Emma as her own. Any financial irregularities were mistakes, not malice. As for the child's statements, Emma has endured trauma, and trauma can blur memory. To strip my client of her rights permanently is unjust." Vanessa rose suddenly, her voice desperate. "I did what I had to. Do you know what it's like to raise a child that isn't yours?" She cried. "She disobeyed." "Enough!" Judge Whitfield's gavel cracked like thunder. The room froze. Parenting is not ownership. Guardianship is not a license to harm. This court has heard enough. All eyes shifted to Emma, seated beside CPS worker Tina Morales. The little girl held her teddy bear but lifted her chin, her gray-blue eyes steady. For the first time, she did not look frightened. She simply held Alexander's gaze across the room, and he gave her the smallest nod. "You are not alone." Judge Whitfield's voice cut through the silence. "This court finds the defendant guilty of financial fraud and child abuse. Custody rights are permanently terminated. Sentencing will follow, but effective immediately. Vanessa Collins is barred from any further contact with Emma Grace Collins." The gavel struck once. The sound reverberated like release. Vanessa's composure collapsed. She sank into her chair, her mask shattered, muttering under her breath. Dawson placed a hand on her arm, but even he looked defeated. Alexander exhaled, the tightness in his chest finally loosening. He turned to Emma, who met his eyes with a small, trembling smile. She reached out and he clasped her hand firmly, the way one anchors a soul to safety. As they left the courthouse, cameras flashed and questions shouted, but Alexander shielded Emma with his coat, guiding her gently through the storm. For Emma, the noise faded into nothing. All she felt was the steady warmth of the hand that had never let go. She whispered, barely audible, "It's over now, isn't it?" Alexander bent close. "The worst part is, the rest we'll build together." And as the two of them stepped out into the cold Boston air, the snow no longer felt cruel. It felt like a clean page waiting to be written. The morning outside Boston Family Court looked like a postcard, pale sun on clean snow, the common glittering as if someone had scattered sugar over the paths. Inside courtroom 6A, the air thrummed with the soft rustle of coats and papers, the hush of people who understood that some decisions are the hinges on which lives turn. At the front, Judge Eleanor Whitfield adjusted her glasses and glanced over the final packet. A neat stack of evaluations, home visits, letters from teachers and doctors, and the latest report from CPS. She'd seen thousands of files, but this one had pressed itself into her thoughts at odd hours, the way certain cases do when a child's future is at stake. The clerk called the matter. Petition for adoption of minor Emma Grace Collins by Alexander James Grant. Alexander rose. In his navy suit and winter gray tie, he looked like every photo a magazine might print of him. Executive, visionary, man of numbers and patents. But his hands betrayed a tremor he couldn't quite control. He wasn't thinking about revenue models or quarterly guidance. He was thinking about a small hand that had fallen asleep curled around his finger the night before. Emma sat beside him, feet not quite reaching the floor, the teddy bear tucked between her knees. A silver ribbon held back her hair. She had insisted on the ribbon. Ms. Carter had sent it with a note, for bravery in color. When the judge looked her way, Emma met the gaze without flinching. "Good morning," Judge Whitfield said. "Mr. Grant, you understand the responsibilities you're asking the court to place in your care?" "Yes, Your Honor," he answered, voice steady, if a shade lower than usual. "I do." "They will be lifelong," the judge continued gently. "Not just until a storm passes." "I'm counting on that," Alexander said. A murmur of warmth moved through the benches. Dr. Melissa Harper sat in the first row, hands folded over a folder that no longer felt like armor. Tina Morales sat beside her, the far edge of a smile easing the lines worry had etched into her face. Ms. Carter had traded paint-splattered sleeves for a neat cardigan, but a smear of blue on her knuckle gave her away. "Very well," the judge said. "Ms. Morales, your office recommends approval?" Tina stood. "We do, Your Honor. Mr. Grant has provided a safe, stable home. Emma's health has improved, her schooling is steady, and she is flourishing." She glanced down, a rare quiver in her voice. "She is seen." Judge Whitfield nodded slowly, then addressed Emma. "Ms. Collins, may I call you Emma?" Emma nodded. "Emma, you're not required to say anything today. But if you want to, I'll listen." Emma looked to Alexander. He didn't speak. He only turned his palm upward on the table, and she placed her hand in it, small and sure. She stood, teddy bear under one arm, ribbon catching the light. "I used to think being quiet made me safer," she said, voice soft but clear. "Now I think being heard makes me safe. Mr. Grant," she glanced up at him and then back to the judge. "He stayed, even when I had bad dreams. He makes pancakes that look funny but taste happy. He tells the truth even when it's hard. I want him to be my dad. For always." The room held its breath, the way an audience does before a perfect chord resolves. Judge Whitfield's eyes softened. "Thank you, Emma." She turned a page, then set the file aside entirely. "This court finds that the adoption is in the best interests of the child. It is ordered and adjudged that Alexander James Grant is the legal and permanent parent of Emma Grace Collins. Congratulations." Her gavel fell once, a sound that, for all its smallness, changed everything. Applause rose, gentle and unforced. Dr. Harper pressed fingertips to her eyes. Ms. Carter let out a little laugh that sounded like light breaking through. Tina looked down at her hands and, to her surprise, found them shaking with relief. Alexander knelt so he and Emma were face to face. "We did it," he whispered. Emma grinned, a whole face thing that made the ribbon tremble. "We did." Outside, on the granite steps, a few reporters hovered at the distance courts require. Alexander waved them off with a quiet shake of his head. A story this fragile didn't need to be told in sound bites. He lifted Emma's scarf a notch higher against the cold, and together they crossed the square, leaving 2 crisp tracks behind them. 2 weeks later, the auditorium at Boston Public Elementary was packed for the winter showcase. Paper constellations hung from the rafters. Children stood in lines that wobbled with the solemn responsibility of performance. On the back wall, framed at last, hung a print of Emma's painting, a bright house beneath an impossible rainbow, windows glowing as if they remembered summer. Ms. Carter introduced her softly. "This is Emma, and this is a little of what she's learned to say with color." Emma stepped up to the microphone, fingers briefly brushing the silver ribbon as if it were a talisman. "Sometimes," she began, "home is not where you start. Sometimes it's where you are finally warm." She looked towards the rows until she found Alexander. "Sometimes home is a person." A pause. Then applause rolling toward her like a gentle tide. She exhaled and smiled, not shy now, but bright, the smile of someone who has crossed a bridge and can still see the water shining below. After the program, in the corridor that smelled of crayons and winter coats, classmates pressed small drawings into her hands, stick rainbows, houses with open doors, lopsided stars. Emma received each one as if it were a medal. "I'll keep them," she said, serious as a promise. That evening, the penthouse didn't feel big. It felt busy. A baking sheet cooling on the stove, store-bought cookies, but who was counting? A new sketch of the skyline taped to the fridge beside a crooked spelling quiz. A pair of child-sized boots splayed gracelessly on the mat. Home is rarely tidy. It is, however, unmistakable. Alexander tucked Emma into bed. The crescent lamp threw its soft harbor of light across the covers. The teddy bear, wash-softened and timeless, took its usual post under her arm. "Big day," he said. "The biggest," she agreed, a yawn tugging at the corner of the word. He smoothed the blanket once more than necessary. His life had been engineered for control, for outcomes he could predict. This nightly ritual of bearing witness to a small person's breathing, was not controllable. It was better. Emma's eyes were already at half-mast when she breathed. Almost sleep, almost song. "Good night, Dad." He felt the word land like a bell rung in a chapel you didn't know you'd been carrying in your chest. He kissed her forehead. "Good night, Emma." He stood in the doorway a moment longer than he needed to, the way people do when they're trying to memorize happiness. Down the hall, the living room glowed. On the table, her newest painting dried. 2 figures on a footbridge over the river, the skyline behind them, a small house in the distance with every window bright. No rainbow this time. None needed. The sky was a deep Boston blue, and the lights did the rest. He switched off the lamp, and the apartment settled. Outside, the city breathed, and somewhere beyond it, the ocean turned in its sleep. Alexander leaned against the window and let the quiet fill him. Wealth had once felt like altitude, impressive, isolating, hard to breathe. Tonight it felt like warmth. 4 walls that kept out the cold, the soft thrum of a heater, a laugh still hiding in the corners from earlier, and a child who had chosen to stay. Belonging, he realized, is not a thing you own. It is a thing you are given carefully by someone brave enough to hand you their trust. He had been handed it. He intended to keep it safe. Snow began again, small, deliberate flakes stitching the city to the sky. Somewhere down the hall, a child turned in her sleep and settled. And in a penthouse that once echoed, a family exhaled. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. If Emma's story of hope and Alexander's promise touched your heart, please consider subscribing for more stories of healing, redemption, and second chances. Because no child should ever feel invisible, and every heart deserves a home.